Welcome, everybody. I'm Trevor Perry. I'm a fresh thinker. My job at Fresh Solutions is a multitude of things. I work on discovery services to modernize companies. I work in software, do consulting, and all over the board. I speak a lot at community events and industry events, and IBM appointed me a champion 5 years ago for my efforts in the community and promoting IBMi. And I have a passion for IBMi, and I'm also concerned that there are a lot of people who don't quite understand what it is. We've had a really glorious, wonderful past and history, but today IBMi is a very new thing. So I start with thinking about what you would tell a new user or a new customer of IBMi, or somebody who doesn't know what IBMi is. If you invited them in and said, what is this thing called IBMi? The first thing we might say, it's an operating system. And just like Windows, it runs on hardware that supports it. In our case, that's Power Systems. So we have a piece of hardware called Power System servers. Those were released by IBM in 2008, and IBMi is an operating system that runs on it. But IBMi is very unique. It's really not an operating system on its own. It's really an operating environment. It contains more functionality in it than most operating systems, and when you compare it, there are things that you do not have to buy when you buy IBMi that you would for other applications and other operating systems. IBMi operating environment includes the following things. It has a built-in database. That database is inherent to everything that we do. It's one database, and it's consistent if you have multiple vendors selling you software that use the same database. You don't have to purchase another one. We don't have database administrators to carve up the environment. This is a very unique thing. And the file serving that we have is also very unique. The user interface used to be simply just a typical green screen. With IBMi, it comes in many forms. Most modern applications that are written today on IBMi use some form of web browser interface that can be used on mobile devices, on PCs, or anything like that. Security. This is the key to IBMi. The security that's built into the operating system is the most secureable of any operating system on the planet. One of the struggles we have is that most people who are using IBMi don't care about the security, and then some companies are still using things like 10-character passwords. There are some people who are still using, open up firewalls and ports into IBMi. While it's the most secureable, it's often not the most secured, but that's built in, it's inherent to the operating system. The work management and the virtualization allow us to run multiple workloads on the same server and scale that by simply adding more resources. We don't have to buy another server and move stuff around. So we can have work management that handles the batch load. We can have work management that handles the interactive conversation. We can have a work management that handles the HTTP and the web serving, and it's all managed by the operating system, and we don't have to spend a lot of time working to support that and manage that and scale that. The virtualization has been there for a long time. We can have multiple partitions, and that's a very easy thing on the Power Systems. We can actually move partitions. It's called live partition mobility, and we can take that partition that's running live, move it to another piece of hardware, another Power System server, and we can actually move it while it's live and no one notices. We can repair the other hardware and then move it back when we're ready. It's amazing what you can do with that. And you can virtualize by adding partitions, and it's also connected to the whole entire Power Systems ecosystem, which includes Linux and AIX, etc. And we'll talk about that. IBMi running on Power Systems has the highest availability of any business platform in the world. Its networking and connectivity is unparalleled, and the security that's in the operating system can basically mean that our networking connectivity can be and scale to whatever level that we need. The auditing is absolutely fabulous. One of the recent things in IBMi 7.3 version of the operating system is collecting authority information so you can determine what users are actually doing and set their authorities up that way. And there's a lot of detailed information built in the operating system that records exactly what is happening with the users, what's coming in and out from a security perspective, and so on. Storage management is just done. We don't have to spend a lot of time carving things up. We can if we like, but we don't have to, and it's very simple when we do. And then application serving, we have that in standard original green screen applications that are being delivered. We can do that with WebSphere kind of applications. And now with IBMi, we have a lighter version of WebSphere application server called Integrated Application Server, and it's used to deliver a lot of very powerful web applications. So all of that comes when you buy IBMi. Now, you need a power system server to run it, and those two are separate things. One's an operating system or an operating environment, and the other is a piece of hardware. So you'll also notice that the logo, which is the first time that IBMi or IBM has ever had a logo for our platform in its history, it says the words "for business." And this is a really key thing. IBMi is not typically used in statistical analysis. It's not typically used for severe, serious analytics or scientific applications. It can be, but it's typically used mostly for business. You'll find it in supply chain companies, distribution, manufacturing, banks seriously use it for its security, and casinos and lodging management systems are built all around IBMi. It's a very strong platform, and it's in most of the Fortune 1000 businesses have IBMi in some form or another. The first question when I ask people who are in our world and in our platform is, have you been to the IBMi home page? You can see there's a link down the bottom, ibm.com/systems/power/I. And the interesting part is this is our platform, this is our world, and the majority of people haven't been to this home page. It's there, it's available to us, and if IBM is giving us this information, we should be lapping it up and we should be reading this as often as we can. And in fact, the last time I did this presentation, it was a different IBMi homepage, and it actually had this on it, and it said IBMi built for business, and it talked about IBMi 7.3, and that was fairly recent. So this web page changes quite significantly on a regular basis and has a lot of fabulous content that we should be doing. So I encourage you, visit this page and also direct people to this page as well. So let's read what they said about IBMi built for business. IBMi is an integrated operating environment. They even say operating environment right there on the page, with a reputation for exceptional security and business resilience. And that's true. You can talk to anybody who's been on our platform, and all the stuff we learned with the legacy platforms that made up what IBMi has become are incredibly strong in their history, their legacy, their heritage, and all of that means that we have security, we have business resilience, and this is why people like this platform so much. And it's really wonderful to see new people come to the platform, how much they like it personally, and how much they understand that it really helps with their business. So from a business perspective, IBMi was actually designed and built from the beginning to be a business server. And it's been that way in the mid-range world that we've lived in forever. It's an incredible operating system. It is the most excellent operating system for business. Where does it run? It runs on a server called Power System Servers, and those are IBM's leading servers. IBM sells System Z, the mainframe, and it sells Power System Servers, and it used to sell Intel-powered System X servers, and they sold that off. Now they have Power System Servers, and that's their key platform. And in fact, Power Systems is growing as well. If you look at the groups in the Open Power Consortium, Power Systems is growing, and we actually are benefiting from that because our IBMi runs on those power systems, and that's a really important thing. So, quick summary. It's integrated operating environment. It's virtualized. You have non-disruptive growth. You can actually move things around. You can do things while live, while running. It's quite an incredible platform in that regard. Some of that is to do with the power systems. When we got power systems and we took advantage of some of the stuff that came with AIX, we were able to do more things on this platform with IBMi than ever before. Trusted security, we've talked about that. Open application design. Some of the people who are in our world are still building and using and leveraging green screen applications. And while that's fine, you can now build in any way that you like to the web. You can deliver your green screens applications to the web. You can build new web applications, new open applications. There are thousands of application solutions from vendors all over the world. And my history recently has been more and more vendors are actually waking up to the fact that this is a platform that is thriving and are coming back again if they've gone, and we're attracting new vendors as well. Simplified operations and storage management. Most of that historically was done through green screens, and IBMi now has IBMi Navigator, and it is able to manage and operate the system through front ends that we can bring in new people who've never seen IBMi, but understand it because of the modern interfaces to managing the system and organizing everything that you want to run, the work management, the storage management, and so on and so forth. So we talked about IBMi running on Power Systems. Power Systems is IBM's leading platform. It's a leading platform for business. It's the best, most scalable server on the planet. And we spend a lot of time in talking about power and recently replacing even some of the mainframes. This is an incredible platform. It's growing with the Open System Consortium. It has its own web page. You can go and find out about what this amazing server is, what this hardware is. The ones that IBM sells today are primarily Power 8. I believe some Power 7 Plus as well. Those servers are being sold. We know that Power 9 is coming, and in fact, IBM has been recently talking about Power 10. This server has a long life, and recently Power Systems was grouped into an IBM group internally called Cognitive Something Solutions, I believe, and that group contains Power Systems. They're not going to change the platform. Power is such a strong band. We're going to have that for a while. So it's fabulous that we're here with IBMi and running on that platform. So power for your business, large enterprises, mid-sized, for developers. And in fact, just recently, the new very small S812, I believe, Power System server is a small rack-based 2U server that can actually run simply just one core and run IBMi on it. For a while, the smallest box you could buy was a 4-core, 6-core, 8-core box. You could turn one core on, but you were spending a lot of money for a 4-core box. Well, now you can actually buy a 1-core box, and they're much, much cheaper. And for a lot of companies that had a smaller box, now they've got a path moving forward for some of their older systems. And if you go to the Power Systems site, you can now compare the Power Systems to Intel, to the x86. And one of the things that IBM did was when they sold the Intel business to Lenovo, they started marketing Linux. And a lot of people ask, why are they focusing on Linux? But my perspective is it's a very simple thing, that they focused on Linux because that was their approach against Intel and against the x86, because if you bring it to power and you want a small appliance to replace a Windows appliance, then you might use Linux. The fortunate part is that we're all connected on this platform. AIX, IBMi, and Linux all run together. Now, the other amazing operating system that runs on Power Systems is Watson. That's a very custom operating system, but it runs essentially on its own Power Systems. But this is an amazing and incredible server that runs these three things. And the best part about when we got Power Systems was it allowed these three to integrate so that they can all talk to one another at the They can share resources at the bottom level. We can automate that and virtualize some of those things. That happens. There's an entire new layer that was added called BIOS, and what that does is allows us to virtualize all of these servers, these operating systems on that server. And what that means now is if you get a server and you're only running IBMi, you don't need to care about it. It's just like one box with everything. But anybody who has multiple operating systems and they want them tightly integrated, running a Power Systems with AIX, IBMi, and Linux is an incredible message that you can send out to the world. This is nothing like we've had in the past, and it's quite incredible. I remember back on System I and System P, I learned Linux on System I, and I was certified in Linux on System I, and I was building hardware for System I, but it was a bit of a effort because the core integration wasn't there. When we got Power Systems, the core integration is there, and it's only got better. And we've learned a lot from the other operating systems as well. And notice in all of those three, the only one that has a For Business logo is IBMi. And no matter what, if IBM sells Linux, they're selling appliances, they are going to want to sell an IBMi operating system with applications in it to that company to run side by side with their Linux applications. Now, in 2013, they celebrated 25 years of the platform in some form or another. And what that was is actually the AS400 was released in 1988, and it evolved and slowly was replaced. But we celebrate that history because IBMi at its core has its heritage in what was OS400 on an AS400. And that core actually came from the System 38. So we have a long heritage. The one they chose to celebrate was IBMi 25 years in 2013. So that's now 4 years ago. But what they did was they actually gave us 25 vignettes. And these vignettes you can find fairly easily looking them up. And they're just things about IBMi that we forget and often forget. And I'm going to remind you of a few of them just so you know how amazing this platform is. Let's start with integration. If you look at the platforms, there's an I in the platform and it comes from integration. And that is actually the essence of what IBMi is about. And IBM tells us it's simple, it's reliable. We have good integration because it hides the complexity. The things that happen with IBMi, the way you talk to applications inside the platform, the way you talk across the Power Systems infrastructure, all of that is built in for you, and it's the core of what we have. And it's what makes IBMi the sort of center of many, many businesses. So integration, we often forget that. It was a fabulous reminder. The TIMI, this is called the Technology Independent Machine Interface. And what that means is that we have been able to change, or IBM has been able to change the chip that's underneath, and the operating system accesses the chip through this independent layer. And if the chip changes, the TIMI changes and the operating system remains the same. And that's been a fabulous thing. We went from, CISC to RISC. We went to Power Systems. We've changed drastically. We're going from Power 8 soon to Power 9. And this TIMI layer means that we're insulated from all of those hardware changes. And a lot of people don't quite understand how amazing that is. When we got SSD storage, it was just put in there because the TIMI layer can handle that. And that's still part of what IBMi is all about, and it protects your investment. The struggle with that is it allows us to keep doing stuff we did 30 years ago when we had a System 38, when we had an AS400, and we sometimes don't move because IBM doesn't need us to move. But what an incredible piece of technology that's been around and is still inside our platform. Single level storage is incredible. I talked about SSDs. SSDs were added. We didn't even notice. They just became part of that single level storage. Everything has a single address, both disk and memory, and we don't really care from our application perspective about carving that up and sorting it out and moving things around. We don't need a database administrator. We have in recent years, because we've been using the applications very well, we need a database watcher, somebody to actually look at it. We call them a database engineer. And what we do there is basically manage the indexing and the way the database is delivered, but we don't manage where it's stored. We don't manage moving it around. We don't manage increasing the size of it. It all happens automatically for us. No other platform has this. They're trying to, but we've been ahead forever, and IBMi takes advantage of that. Object orientation is a key thing because essentially you cannot run on IBMi, you cannot run a file and you cannot access the data inside a program, unlike most other platforms where you can basically look at something and manipulate it. You must use the object orientation. It's secure, and it's meant that inside of IBMi operating system, malware and other malicious attacks and spam and viruses haven't actually been able to implement themselves inside of IBMi because of the object orientation. And it means that IBMi is one of the most securable IT systems available today. We talked about virtualization earlier, and Power VM is now the way that we do this. And so we use Power VM, and we can support multiple IBMi virtual machines. We can talk to one another. IBMi can host its own virtual machines. It's absolutely quite incredible. And the automatic adjustment of the resources of the hardware to the operating system is now something that just is absolutely incredible. And it means you can balance your workload amongst multiple partitions, whether they're IBMi, Linux, AIX, across the Power system. And so it is one of the most efficient and scalable SaaS platforms. And that's been interesting. IBMi has been a cloud platform for a long time, and it's coming into its own today with lots more managed service providers, with MSPs providing IBMi solutions. The user interface, we have millions of lines of code, of 5250 applications, which is using Telnet to deliver a green screen. Today, though, there are many third-party tools and many IBM tools that allow us to deliver those 5250 applications and deliver them well to web or to some kind of rich client that a vendor may provide. And with application modernization, we're able to, deliver applications that look very, very modern. One of the struggles we have is there's a lot of applications being delivered today that still look old and green, and we struggle with reputation on IBMi. Those are AS400 applications. Those are not IBMi applications. And so we need to be sure that when we develop and when we build applications that we're delivering them and they're new. I've got a customer who said to me, I built an application and they said, where's it running? And I said, IBMi. And they said, I don't believe you because it looked like a modern web application. And that's what IBMi applications are. With open access for RPG, we can now manage our modern applications by taking our green screen applications and modernizing them using a handler process, and that's delivered by several vendors. But that's an amazing technology that allows us to deliver applications that in the past looked old and just transform them very, very quickly to something that looks very modern. So RPG's been around for a long time. People say it's old. People say COBOL is old. I live on Long Island, New York. The local universities here have huge demand for COBOL and CICS in Manhattan, and they cannot fill that need. RPG, there's very little demand at universities for RPG. Interestingly enough, there's a huge demand amongst IBMi shops. But RPG is modern now, and teaching it in schools is very easy. And so it's very straightforward to learn because it looks very modern. And if you write RPG in a modern free format language the way it is, it's actually very, very simple for us to manage. It's very simple for us to teach. It's very simple for us to maintain. It has a history that if we write it in the old free format or the old fixed format or the old /free format, people look at it and say, I don't want to learn that, and they'll go away. We can attract people if we write modern RPG. Yes, there's a level we need to maintain some of the older stuff, but as we're modernizing and transforming it, RPG is a very strong and amazing business language. It handles online transaction processing like nothing else. and it has functionality that takes a long time to write in other languages. So RPG in its modern form, the way it is today on IBMi 7.3, is an incredible language, even though it has a history of coming from something that was originally a report generator. It's no longer called report program generator, it's called RPG. That's its name, and we celebrate how amazing it is. So, some other IBMi languages. With the latest releases of the operating system, 7.1, 7.2, 7.3, we've been getting technology refreshes on a very regular basis. And in the latest technology refreshes, which are every 6 months, and we get major technology upgrades without having a brand new version of the operating system, we've had the advantage of seeing new languages added. Many years ago, we had PHP added, and that's an open source language. It has an owner, if you will, called Zend, but it's affected by open source development. We've since then had Ruby, Python, Node.js, and Perl. Perl was recently added in the latest technology refresh. These are languages that we can now write applications on IBMi and access the IBMi database that we were talking about and deliver that application. So if you were to get somebody from college, and in North America, Python is the #1 language taught in colleges to teach programming. Java has now lost that title. So if I get a Python programmer, bring them into my IBMi shop and have them productive immediately writing Python applications on IBMi, accessing the data that's in my IBMi application, I can then drag those people to IBMi very quickly because they can come up to speed right away on the platform because it's a familiar language to them. They need to know how to access the database, but that's the same with all these modern languages. And while we do get technology refreshes every 6 months, we're actually getting updates to these open source languages on a much more regular basis, and sometimes 2 or 3 times a week. And we can maintain and be current on these languages like the industry. We've got to be up to date on 7.2 and now 7.3, and we've got to keep up to date with our operating system to have these languages available. And I've got customers that are at 6.1 and can't take advantage of some of these things, and we're working to modernize their operating system version up to the latest so we can start bringing in new programmers and new applications and delivering things that we could never do before on the historical versions of these machines. The way we deliver open source OSS is through the PASE environment, Portal Application Systems or Solutions environment. And that environment is essentially native Unix running on IBMi. And it's evolved as well. For a long time, you couldn't compile anything in the PASE environment. You can now do that today. And now with some of the XML tools that they've built, delivering applications and delivering languages that can talk to the database on the back end and have a completely different front end than ever before is enabled through PASE. IBM is developing this and growing this and keeping it up to date and giving us more tools. This is a really strategic environment, and it means that you can bring an AIX environment, run it native on IBMi through this PASE environment, and it shares the load and it shares the database, and it can take advantage of all the other amazing things that IBMi is. Now, user groups historically have been quite incredible, and when Power Systems came to the IBMi world, then what we've discovered is that these user groups are quite absolutely incredible because it gets us out and together. And yes, a lot of that has gone to the web, but I have seen the power of user groups. I have seen the power of the people getting together and talking in person and networking rather than trying to do something and solve it online. And some of these user groups, I'm going to speak next week at the Ocean User Group in California. I spoke recently at the WMCPA group. NEUGC has a conference running right now. All of these, I'll be at the LISUG May Day in May and the IUG group. All of these groups are very strong and very powerful. And you have to understand that growing one is very difficult. But here's an example. Last year in October was the first meeting of a user group. They're now called Magic, and this Magic user group is taking off and growing, and it's getting people back together, and it's growing the passion for IBMi. If you have a chance to get engaged and meet, even if it's just a meetup, and you sit around and talk at a table, at a restaurant, a coffee shop, in a public square, just get together and enjoy the camaraderie that we have with IBMi. I want to take a bit of a short detour based on my job. I do a lot of IT strategy, and we do a lot of modernization. And IT strategy and modernization is really important to me. And in the modernization world, we need to take people from where they are and look at where they're headed and build them a roadmap. And that's my smiley face strategy. That's my personal strategy. And I teach that. It's very simple. There's a lot more detail to it. But what we need to understand a lot is modernizing your applications is not just about your applications, but you must modernize your hardware, your infrastructure. Your stakeholders need to be modernized, the users, the people who are related to this system and get benefit from it, but also the developers. So we understand where are you right now is an important place. And a lot of people are living in a world of the past, and just identifying that helps us understand where they are. So I ask you this question, and I ask all of my strategy sessions, what would your IT look like if you started today? You might start with email would be in the cloud. You wouldn't have a server internally for a while. You'd use your CRM. Probably your payroll applications would all be outsourced. And what about next year or the year after that? What would it look like? Because if you said, that's what I would have today, if I started today, that's your roadmap. That helps your roadmap. That's the destination. And now we then build you from where you are to where you're headed, and we do it in one of these ways. And here are some standard terms we use. All are words. I use repurposing a lot, but we could replace, we might recommission, we may refit what we've got. There are many ways to build a roadmap. And in that roadmap, sometimes people lose sight of IBMi, and they think that it's something that's old and outdated. So a simple example here is, this is where I talk to people about where they are, build them a where are you headed kind of solution. And the question is how do I build that roadmap? And look, here's a scribble on a sheet of paper that I wrote for a roadmap. All of that's important. But where does IBMi fit in that? And in our world, the world of IBMi, modernization sometimes gets rid of it. One of the ways to solve that, to help your executives, to help partners, to help people understand it, is to learn that IBMi has a strategy, or IBM has a strategy for IBMi. And you can get it. That button that looks like a white space is clickable, and it will take you to a thing called the IBMi strategy and roadmap. I encourage you to go read this, to share this, and understand that IBM is committed to IBMi, and that means that we can be, in our world, with all the advantages we have. And IBM also, this is a fabulous page, but they also have a white paper you can download. So I encourage you to download that and pass that around. And it's actually written by the general manager of IBM Power Systems, Doug Balog, and he says the following things. He says that IBMi plays a critical role, and that means it's got a future. We continuously provide new solutions, actively engage in supporting new business requirements for our clients. That means they're out in our user groups, they're talking to us, and they're finding out what we want. And we need to understand that IBM is as committed to this platform. If anybody has any questions, this strategy white paper can do that. So one more step beyond all of this, and that is, can IBMi fit into a modern world? So I looked at a couple of different studies. There's been one, this was in 2012 and then again in 2014, and we believe there's a new one, and it's a study from ITG about IBMi and power systems. And it gives us a couple of charts, and here's one that says this is acquisition costs, total cost of acquisition, and that is the green, and then the total cost of ownership, the ongoing cost, is the pink. the orange color. And if you look, when you have IBM I, this was 7.2 on Power Systems, the cost is substantially cheaper for total cost of acquisition and total cost of ownership than the other platforms. And what happens is, oftentimes, because IBM I is so easy to manage and so easy to run, because of that, people don't think it's doing very much. And if you've got Windows and you've got Linux running on x86 and you're doing all of this management and you're having to spend time DBA and security and you're working hard, it looks like something's going on. With IBM I, it's all done. It's managed easier. It's much simpler. It's integrated. And so it does cost you less. The hardest part is having people understand that. The downtime for IBM I, Power Systems, the cost of that is so much cheaper than any other platform. We're looking forward to the next version of this ITG study. Watch out for it. It should be out very, very soon. Help Systems runs a IBM I marketplace survey, and they've actually got some year-over-year highlights when they put this out, and that was like slide 25 of 30. 94% of businesses believe IBM I is going to have a long future, and the people who are planning to migrate away in the next 2 years was about 4%. Now, obviously, this is conditioned by the fact that this is mostly just people who responded to the survey. If somebody's wanting to leave, they may not be responding to this kind of survey. So, but it is small, and the actual number of people wanting to leave Windows and leave Linux platforms and leave mainframe is much higher. So IBM I actually has a smaller percentage of people wanting to leave than what appears like in our world. IBM I has a roadmap. This was from last year. IBM gave us this roadmap and said, we've given you 7.1 for 4 years. We gave you 7.2 for 2. 7.3 is coming. We know that they got an I next and an I next plus 1. We know that because we've had this chart since IBM I was announced in 2008, and we've always done an I next plus 1. And at some point, 7.1 was I next, 7.2 was I next plus 1. We believe them because they've been doing this and giving it to us. And they also have a support roadmap where they tell us when something will end in service, and you look at the arrows on the right, and that says we don't have a date yet. Now, just yesterday or the day before, IBM I 7.1 end of support life was announced, and this chart will be updated in the next week or so, and I'm sure I'll get a version of that. But go look for that because 7.1 is now going to be out of service next year. 7.2 and 7.3 are the current ones, and we expect when whatever's next after 7.3, 7.2 will then be no longer supported either. So keeping up to date is actually going to be 2 to 3 years cadence, but it's very, very easy to move from 7.1 to 7.2 and 3 and so on and so forth. We expect that to continue. Now, a quick history. People are concerned about what it is and what it was, and it is very simple. We once had an AS400 at the top left. That came from System 38 and System 36. That was replaced with an I series. That was simply just a faceplate change and a rename, but it wasn't a rename against AS400. IBM changed their whole entire branding to E server. They made I series, P series, X series, and Z series or Z series. They did the same with System I, and then after that, they merged System I and System P to Power Systems. You'll notice System X was still around until it was sold, and System Z or System Z is still available and still around. That operating systems that happened in 1988, we got OS 400. With the I series, it remained OS 400. They did rename it in 2006 on the System I for i5 OS. That obviously included a power number. They couldn't continue that. So in 2008, which is now 9 years ago, they renamed the operating system to run it on this new piece of server, the Power Systems. So IBM I is essentially changed quite drastically once it moved off System I and onto Power Systems, and it is a new thing. It has got the heritage of what was in OS 400, but IBM I is an operating system. It's not an AS400. It's not an I series. It is a brand new operating system, and it's like you'd never say the Windows, so we don't talk about the IBM I. It's called IBM I. It's just like another operating system, AIX, I, or Linux. Now, just to be sure about this, the proper name for I is exactly that, the letter. The issue with that is Googling and searching. So what we in the industry use is IBM space I. We post that. We can now Google it because we have consistency. For Twitter and LinkedIn for hashtags, we use hash IBMi without a space, but that's the way that we find it today. We obviously, IBM recognized you can't Google I, so they told us to use IBMi, and that was in 2008. And I can tell you, I still heard the other day, the guy said, I can't Google IBMi. I asked him, had he done it? He said, no. The answer is there's more modern information about IBMi that's tagged with IBMi. You may still have to search for some of the older names, but typically it's changing quite quickly now, and IBMi is gaining traction on Google. Now, for the future, can it really run well in our future? IT directions, for the most part, IBM a couple of years ago said ours was cloud, analytics, mobile, social, and they made a play for IBMi in all of those. The latest extras have been DevOps, OSS, and security, all of which IBMi is very strong at. Cloud, obviously, we've got more and more people moving IBMi into the cloud. It's becoming a preferred model to have a SaaS solution. And the hybrid cloud, which is some of you internal, some of you external, some of it private, some of it public, power is what's building the cloud. And so power is very, very strong. If you look at the CIO magazine, they gave us cloud computing predictions. So watch for this stuff, because every time I look at this, I learn something new and amazing. And what's here is all of this stuff is done with IBMi, except for that thing called containers. And I encourage you to look at containers and what they will hold for you and see where IBMi moves into containers. Once we have containers and we can move IBMi applications around in an easier manner, which we can do somewhat today, containers will facilitate that. When they'll come to IBMi, we're not sure, but it's going to be amazing to watch. Analytics is all about collecting data. It's for demand of information and Watson rules the world, but we've recently found out we can connect, and IBM added Bluemix connections, AWS connections, Amazon Web Services, and we can now connect to other online services, and through Bluemix, we can actually connect to Watson and do analytics like we've never done before using the data we have in IBMi. And again, some top predictions about things. They're talking about Internet of Things is happening. Watch for that. We are a collector of data. If you're using wearables like smartwatches or even smartphones and they're collecting data, that stuff's going to come back and run in the IBMi world, and we're going to have to need access to it. So mobile, of course, is happening anywhere, anytime. IBMi doesn't have a problem with mobile. The developers sometimes do, but the application supports mobile very, very well and allows us to get to our database, store that data, and then perform analytics on it. Social, with IBMi, we're able to deliver many more social kind of experiences. A lot of people are even running WordPress sites on IBMi through the PASE environment, and it's very simple now to set up and run, and it's scalable, and it accesses your existing application data. Social is allowing us to deliver information and to capture information and to engage in the community for your business, and that's really powerful, important. DevOps is interesting because some people are predicting it's gone already, but the idea is that we work better between the operations people and the software delivery people. This is happening. There's a lot of vendors in IBMi world talking about it. It's interesting that some people think managed services killed DevOps. It's new, but IBMi works very well in that environment. OSS, open source software, is happening. IBMi is starting to share code everywhere for this, which is pretty amazing and incredible. But we can bring those things to IBMi, and that community in IBMi is growing tremendously. And security, of course, is really important. There's more than just your operating system or operating environment security, but we have been a securable system for a very long time. And I encourage you, if you're on a platform, make sure that you do that first with all of the hacks and with all of the noise about people hacking, just something as amazing as the US election. All of that stuff is quite incredible, and we need to start that and do that. And IBMi facilitates all of that. So we're working really well. IBMi works well with all the things that are happening that people are predicting. And Gartner, having the 2016 hype cycle, has got all of these things that are going to be in play over the next year or 2 years or whenever, but every single one of them, we're already in cloud, mobile, social information technology. We're already in those. And the purple and the red and the blue is all happening as well. We're starting to move these things. They're coming to IBMi. 3D printing is happening in the world. And when will it come to IBMi for you? And how will that help your business? Artificial intelligence is something that is going to rely on what's in IBMi and the applications that we're running to know stuff. And we're going to create new design and innovation approaches, and we'll use those on IBMi. So even Gartner talking about it, and this was a chart that actually has the time frames on it where they might take a longer time to come. But all of these things that are happening, I watch these carefully because I believe that IBMi will work in this world. It's such a different world than delivering just a green screen application. That's the IBMi of the future, and I encourage you to head in that direction, even if it's just understanding what's happening today. Our jobs are often maintenance, or our jobs are often coding new applications for our existing customers, but these are the things that are going to change our world and our business, and IBMi is prepared for that. So what is a modern IBMi? It's all of those things that we talked about. And at the Edge conference, the IBM Edge conference in 2016, this is Tom Rosamilia, and he said, this was his chart. I took that photo and said, there's no one technology that matters most. It's connecting the dots between them all that's important. And connecting the dots is where IBMi fits. And if you're moving forward in a modern world, in a modern business, IBMi is built for integration. It's a database that's unparalleled. Its security is the most securable business application or business platform on the system. So we fit in IBM's future. We fit in the future of IT. IBMi has a strong future, and we have to pretend that its heritage is gone. And we have to change our mindset so that we develop and build applications and we leverage all of these quite incredible and amazing things that the IBMi operating environment is. So I'm going to end there with one question, and that is, what will you do for IBMi? One of the struggles that we have in our world is literally we don't have enough people who are promoting the platform. Now, what does that mean? Promoting the platform means we talk about it like it's a modern platform. We use it like it's a modern platform. We promote it like it's a modern platform. And it's difficult because we're humans and we've got some history that says, oh, I'm familiar with the other one. I encourage you to step up to IBMi. I encourage you to teach people what this platform is about. And I encourage you to make noise. Now, if you think your job is in jeopardy because you're telling somebody that IBMi is the most amazing platform, then it's a very simple answer, and you can just say, Trevor told me.